How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with David Bailis. He is a professional musician, runner, and man of many talents. Went to the Berklee School of Music, has family that went to Juilliard. So musician, or music, I guess, is just a huge part of who he is. And I obviously love that. If you guys know me at all, you know that I love music. So yeah, don't want to say too much, but without further ado, I want to introduce you to David Ballas. Thank you so much for jumping on and doing me the honor of getting to talk to a 2:53 marathoner. That's super impressive.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting for me because not only so this podcast typically have on different endurance athletes, but my three main interests in life are endurance sports, so that's one of them. Music's a huge piece just because of how I grew up in business. So it sounds like you kind of form in the middle of these three and coalesce quite nicely. So I'm super excited to jump into it and get to know a bit about you, what you do, and how you do it.
Yeah, definitely. Music and running are certainly my passions in life, and then business is sort of a necessary element to make it all happen, right?
Exactly. Yeah, man. Awesome. Well, we're going to get into all those things. So many things to touch on and cover. But on this podcast, I like opening up with a question for the guest that is, who is that person? So who is David?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a musician, guitar player here in New York City. I've lived in New York for many, many years now.
Okay.
It's definitely part of my identity being a New Yorker, living in Brooklyn, and being part
Oh,
of the music scene here in New York. And that's certainly music has been my passion pretty much my whole life. And I'm also I'm a dad. I've got a couple little kids, and most of my days these days consist of music, running, and kids, and shuffling my kids from place to place and being a
yeah.
dad. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And I was perusing around your Instagram some and some of your website stuff, and it seems like Sky, is that one of your daughters?
That's my daughter. Yeah. My
Okay,
daughter is
nice.
Sky. My son is 6. He's Leaf.
Leaf. Okay. Leaf and
Yep.
Sky. I love it.
And yeah, and I'm also a vegan athlete, so that's another big aspect of my life and
That's
my
awesome.
training as an endurance athlete. And I've been vegan now, getting close to 15 years.
Wow.
I've been competing in endurance sports for like around 10 years, and really it was kind of coalesced with the pandemic
Mm,
that I around 2000, late 2019, and then it just happened in 2020 that I really started to dial in on the running thing.
okay.
Try to really, and not doing as much of the swim and the bike, and really trying to dial in my running
Yeah.
life.
So what does running give you that music does not?
Oh, it's not necessarily one gives me something the other does not. I think they work together. It's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the same circle of life for me, and keeping me balanced,
Mm,
challenging me,
sure.
goals. I'm definitely a person who, no matter what I do in life, I'm someone who likes to really figure out the essence of things and try to get better. I love to improve and really figure out the little things, the nuances, and then the big picture, and try to get better and set big time goals. So I think music and running go hand in hand in that way. Running can be a little bit more specific, like, oh, I have this time goal, versus
Yeah.
art is not quite so tangible. But I
Mm,
think they really go hand in hand, and just having a clear head and having your body feel good is really a great thing, I think, as an artist and as a musician. Um, and they're very connected.
yeah.
It's interesting, the nuances of, you know, speed as a musician and practicing is similar to practicing and figuring out ways to get better as a runner. There's a lot of similarities just in training as well, and
Sure.
dialing in discipline and patterns and routine. Routine. I'm a huge routine guy.
Yeah.
Of course, it's important to break out of your routine to do big things, but I'm a person who thrives on routine in my life. Waking up early and running, or, working out is critical for me, and having a routine. I do really well when I'm training for races in a training plan versus kind of just training
Yeah.
aimlessly. I'm
Hmm.
someone who thrives on that routine. Okay, I know what I'm going to do for the next 15 weeks every morning, and I'm not going to miss one of those workouts. And then same thing with practicing music, where I have things that I'm working on, and having that routine in the day uh, the daily routine, the daily practice. So there's a lot of connection between the two.
Yeah, yeah, no,
They
it's
feed
beautifully
each
said.
other.
Yeah, 100%. Well said. Yeah, I think for me, with the creative outlets, I find that during the endurance, especially long bike rides and long runs, it allows the head to kind of sift through a lot of things. And some of my greatest, I would consider my greatest ideas or aha moments, or even from like a mental and spiritual perspective of coming to a conclusion of something, some event on one of those sessions, it's pretty profound. So I would have to agree.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
yeah.
And then another element is these past few years I've been focusing more on working and being an artist in just New York, but I toured for many, many years, hundreds of shows a year. And
Wow.
exercise is such a critical element when you're touring all the time. You know, there's a lot of sitting and waiting. You're stuck in a tour bus or a van and waiting at venues and stuff like that. And just at least moving your body makes the show so much better every night versus just
Mm,
being in this kind of like sluggish travel endless travel cycle of sluggish and eating versus like really getting a sweat on and feeling good every day. So that's another really critical aspect. And that's partly why I started Torganic. Like I have the podcast and it used to be a blog. Blogs are kind of dated now, but it used to just be more of a sort of journal to help guide other musicians and people that are traveling a lot that it is possible to be healthy on the road while you're traveling constantly.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about that. Like when you first started traveling and touring, was this um to organic, becoming vegan, was this all kind of coalescing at the same time as a
Yeah.
need for health? Because you realize like, oh, this is very hard to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, totally. Totally. I started to realize that there's kind of a diverging path of the party, just kind of endless party alcohol
Mm,
lifestyle that many, many musicians go down and that is it for them. They never really break out of that. And, a lot of people can continue to do that for many years. But for me, I quickly realized that that's not what was going to make me feel fulfilled or happy.
yeah,
And so I really went hard in the other direction of not really drinking, really trying to get as much rest as I could, and also prioritizing exercise every day on tour and trying to figure out how to be a vegan and eat healthy. I'm not saying that you have to be vegan to eat healthy on the road. So, but really just trying to figure out how to eat healthy while you're traveling as a musician, which is a challenge.
yeah,
It's a challenge, but it's totally possible. The main thing I say is that it just takes preparation.
yeah,
But yeah, exactly. They were all kind of coalescing at once. And then as I got just deeper in the world of eating healthy and exercise, that kind of just launched me into competing and stuff like that.
yeah. So I have some deeper questions, but first I have a shallow question about vegan things. Because so I
Yeah.
was vegan for a long time, and I'm actually feeling like maybe I should go back to being full vegan. But since I've been doing the triathlon thing a bit more really intense the past few years, I can get away with eating, to be honest, more junk. So, but the question I had that was a little bit shallow. What is your favorite vegan restaurant across the U.S. that you've been to? Because I've had quite a few, and I love hearing of new ones. So, what's your favorite?
Wow. That's a hard one, man. My favorite vegan restaurant in the whole US. Poof. Um, Let me think. I feel like, oh yeah, okay. My favorite one that I can think of off the top of my head is this place in San Francisco, or it's really in Berkeley.
Okay,
I think they have two branches and one in Oakland. Um, we're gonna have to put it in the show notes, but or something like that because I'm spacing on the name. But it's run by these kind of like I want to say they're like Tibetan monks or something. They're like these
okay,
monks. It's such a cool place, and you just get a plate. You don't typically order off a menu. It's basically like you either get a small plate or a large plate.
okay.
And oh man, I'm spacing on the name. It's
Is
been
it
a
called
while.
Cafe Tibet?
No, no. Um, I yeah. See if you can.
Nomad Tibetan?
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong on I'm steering you wrong on the Tibet. But if you put in like vegan Berkeley or something like that, I bet you we could find it. Or
I'm
vegan
I'm
Oakland.
looking it up.
That's my favorite place. And there's two. There's one right near this venue, the Ivy Room that I used to play at.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, maybe see if you can find it. There's a lot of vegan restaurants out there.
There's a
It's
ton. I looked up a list and there's like 50.
There's like 50. Yeah.
There is literally like 50. The Butcher's Son, Ton Vegan, Humble, Long Life Veggie House, Chaya,
It's got some more like exotic East Asian name or something like that.
Udupi,
No,
Tomonte. Anyway, we'll figure it out and
we'll
have
figure
to
it
throw
out.
it in the show notes
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
exactly.
But
We'll put it in the show notes. And so that I love places like that are super unique. Of course, like I
yeah,
love like a good vegan restaurant anywhere, but I love unique places that it's like wow, there's nothing else like this. There's a
yeah.
place outside Boston too that's kind of similar called Masao's Kitchen, Masao
I think I've
apostrophe
eaten
s.
there.
Yeah, and that's kind of similar where you pay by the weight. But it's something where you're like, wow, I couldn't really find this anywhere else. This is such a unique thing. It's one guy who prepares it. So yeah, I love, I love any restaurant, honestly, that's helping support vegan people.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah, yeah.
supporter.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, with being like taking on the vegan challenge or the blessing of it, I guess is one way to look at it as well. When you first started, was this a choice out of like obviously you wanted to be healthier, but was there any external influence or people or a certain mindset or something that kind of influenced you going in that direction?
I think I had some inspirations early on, but it was mostly just an intuitive thing where I thought that, I'm going to see how this goes. It was fairly early on in the endurance athletes being vegan movement. There wasn't quite as much information out there and not as documentaries and stuff. So at first it was
Yeah.
just my intuition thinking, oh, I'm going to try this. And then realizing that I felt really good eating that way. And I felt my recovery was great. I felt like I had a ton of energy compared to other people around me.
Yeah.
And the restriction in diet also just helped me be focused about what I was eating.
Mhm.
And I'm not just being vegan, but also focusing on whole foods and, not eating processed foods as
Yeah.
well. For me, those two things go hand in hand. They don't have to, obviously, but yeah. So it was mostly just my health and kind of dipping my toe in that water and feeling that I was really performing better. Everything was going well, and then a little later on, I started to get into the documentaries and learning
Forks over
about
knives.
forks over knives, and then cowspiracy,
Oh yeah.
and learning about the environmental impact of the animal agriculture and sort of the dark sides of some
Sure.
things that are happening in this world, and that really helped reinforce the decision for me. The unethical treatment of animals, the whole factory farming thing
Yeah.
is a real dark thing for me that I
Yeah,
want to stay as far away from as possible.
it's dirty business for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to go back a bit, but I really enjoyed talking about the vegan stuff because I was vegan for quite a while, and I'm thinking about going back to it. So I'm
Yeah,
on you pulling an influence there.
and I want to shout out Rich Roll. You probably know Rich Roll.
Yeah,
He's become uber famous at this point, but I was a
yeah,
really early Rich Roll listener, and
like
read Finding Ultra very shortly after it came out, and I felt like he was a guy that started to put a lot of people together
mhm.
that were sort of reinforcing some things that I had been thinking about and sort of my instincts. He really helped in a lot of ways, I think, put together. He was a leader in that movement that,
Yeah,
at this point, he's much beyond more beyond an athlete. He's more just like a thought leader at this point.
yeah, 100%. He's in the top three podcasts that I've really tried to mold after. Obviously, we are much
Sure.
smaller budget than Ritual, but yeah, hopefully one day to have him as a guest would be pretty epic. But yeah, he's definitely brought in some amazing thought leaders and mindfulness and health and exercise, all those things.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So you said you've been in New York for, I think it was 13, maybe 15 years. What was home before New York?
Almost 20, actually.
Oh, wow.
Boston. Yeah. I went to Berklee
Boston.
College of Music in Boston.
Okay.
And basically, right when I finished that, a month later, I moved to New York to try
Okay.
to forge a career as a musician in New
Yeah.
York City.
So what was it like growing up in Boston as a kid?
Awesome. I loved it. It's a great place to grow up. Great, so many great things. It's a small city, but there's a lot of, it's still a lot going on as a young kid, and the love of sports is deep there. Local sports.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big thing as a kid. So I loved it. And then as a young musician, it's a great place. There's so many great musicians and you know, an incredible music scene just through all the musicians that are going to school there and all the teachers. So it was great.
Yeah.
I needed to leave. It was for me personally. I wanted to be in a bigger city with more going on, but for at the time, it was great.
Yeah. So what were you like as a kid?
I was I guess we're, you know, depending on what stage, but I was a kid who broke a lot of rules. I was certainly wanted to go against the grain.
Okay.
I was very young. I was a musician, but I was also an athlete when I was young. But the music thing really took over in my life by high school, by mid high school. When I was a kid, I played sports all the time with my friends. We were pretty much obsessed with sports
Hmm.
um, and music. And I got in a lot of trouble. I was a wild,
Elaborate.
oh, I was a wilder kid. It's funny because people think I'm very chill now, but when I was young, I was a wilder kid. I just broke a lot of rules, and I was sort of counterculture and trying to fight the system and fight for my independence. And
Yeah.
luckily, I had parents that were pretty understanding. They dealt
Yeah.
with it. They dealt with it. And
How,
I never went too far to getting anything extreme, but I was certainly pushing the limits of what kids my age should be doing.
so what was 13 or 14 or maybe 16-year-old David doing that was pushing the limits?
Drug use, partying, staying out, sneaking out, going to places I probably shouldn't have been at 14, you know, messing around with hallucinogens and
Oh man.
yeah, really trying to get out there
Yeah.
and see what was happening with my friends and, you know, really into music. By that point, I was full on into guitar. So, you know, I was soaking up Jimi Hendrix, the whole culture of music
Hmm.
and going deep into that. And, you know, I'm thankful that I feel like I found my way out too. You know, I
Yeah.
didn't go too far down that where I feel like I was permanently scarred. And in a lot of ways, it was good. It was a period of exploration, pushing the limits. I was going through a lot. My mom was really sick when I was a kid
Mm.
for most of my life with cancer, and she passed away. So I think there was a
Mm.
lot, also some things going on there that I was
Sure.
probably just, there was a level of escapism and trying to have some semblance of control over my own life, you know, in any way I could
Yeah.
with all these things that as you get a little older, you start to realize are completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you seem, how old are you now?
45.
Okay, so at 45, I would consider you like you're a pretty joyful person. You have a lot of vibrance in life. You seem like you have a pretty light spirit about you, so you're not carrying a lot of the baggage. I mean, having a like I lost my father when I was 16
Okay.
to suicide actually, and for a long
Oh
time
no.
carried that dark baggage. Still part of it still carried with me, but not in the same level of like, oh, he hasn't dealt with his stuff kind of a thing. You obviously seem like you've dealt with what happened with your mom. What led you along that journey to like coming to terms and to a place where you can look back on it now? I mean, I'm sure there's still some pain, but do you feel like you've processed and worked through that fully?
Yeah, it's a great question. I I don't know if you can ever fully work through it, but we just do the best we can every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly think that up to that point, I was sort of in this haze. And when she passed, it was a huge eye opening thing for me as a young person to just to realize about death and to be hit so starkly in the face of death and
How old
what
were you?
I was 20.
Mm.
I was 20 and she probably from the time I was 11, she had been struggling with cancer and it had,
Wow.
you know, been really bad and it gotten better and really bad. And then the last, I'd say couple of years was very dark. And, so yeah, it was, I'd say at that point, once she passed, it was a really incredibly eye-opening experience for me, just in terms of my whole life shifted and my priorities shifted, and I got much more focused. I started to really prioritize things in my life in a different way, and I have a lot of gratitude in that sense for that I was able to use that as a way to focus. I actually, you know, moved back in with my dad at that point, and um, that's when I started music school and I started to really focus on a lot of things. So I think I tried to subconsciously took a lot of positives from it, from what was a, you know, on the surface a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Um, and I think over the years that's only continued, and of course the pain of not having a parent to share your life with is there, but
Hmm.
and also just being appreciative of the time we did have and getting any inspiration I could have from her life and trying to learn from what she went through, and trying to bring her. She was a pretty badass person herself, and trying to continue her spirit in the way I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's your dad doing?
He's good. He's
Yeah.
good. He's a chill. He's a very brilliant, chill guy. So he remarried a couple years later, and he's a happy guy. He's generally a very happy guy. So
Yeah. That's
yeah,
good. That I would say. So I'm going to ask you, which parent do you think you're more like? But I'm going to guess that the joyous, happy personality comes more from your father.
maybe. Yeah, I would say I'm probably more like my mom in a lot
Really?
of ways. Because yeah, I'm sure I have a lot of both in me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's usually whenever I ask that question, because it's one I like to ask often, it's always interesting to hear some people say. Most people do say that they are like an even mix, which is totally understandable. But some people are very adamant about like, no, I'm very much like this or like that.
I
So
think
it's
I'm more
interesting.
like my mom in a lot of ways. My
Yeah.
mom was a huge risk taker, and that's always kind of been a thing that I like to do in my life. She was also a huge boundary pusher and a risk taker, and I think
Yeah.
that's sort of a fundamental aspect of my life. Just being a musician is just a massive
Yeah.
gamble in itself. And in endurance racing, I'm not doing anything too crazy. You're a triathlete. People do super wild stuff, but
Yeah.
I still think I try to really push it with my training, and not that that's necessarily risk taking, but boundary pushing. And I think she also was very in touch with making as big an impact as she could in her time on Earth, which I guess is another lesson that I took from her, and how when she passed, just trying to make the biggest impact we can. Tomorrow it's a cliche, but tomorrow's not guaranteed, and really push to make as big an impact as we can in the time we have.
Hmm. Yeah. 100%. So how does that affect you as a father now with two children?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I really try to impart the wisdom, or any wisdom that I can, and try to give them that independence to run free, because I know I needed that too, but also yeah, it's a tough balance. Do you have kids?
I don't, not yet. I'm 31. My wife just graduated from school, so it's on the horizon.
Yeah, it's parenting is tough, man.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. It's like it's the most gratifying thing ever, but it's also tough. And you just hope that you're doing the best you can guiding these kids. Like I try to, be an inspiration to them, and they're super active kids, and they do a lot of stuff. My son, he's playing drums, he's doing a million things. He's on the chess team, and he's a rad little guy. My daughter, she's on a gymnastics travel team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's super into gymnastics, competing, and she's, on a ninja warrior team and does like all this crazy stuff. So like,
Wow.
I think one way I can is just by working to give them these opportunities, and hopefully let them thrive. One thing I want my kids to hopefully have in their life is, you don't need to be good at everything, and you don't need to do everything, but I want them to find a couple things in their life, hopefully one thing that they're really into and that they can really hone in and get good at and learn a skill. I think that's so valuable for a kid. I'm hopefully with my daughter it's gymnastics, but they need to find it to some degree to themselves. But like I
Hmm.
had with the guitar, like you're doing, it sounds like with endurance training, like we have with running, honing in on things and trying to really get good at one thing there's so much to learn from that. Patience, routine, investment in yourself. So that's the main thing that I'm trying to push onto my kids, and hopefully make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How old are they again? You said
6 and 8.
6 and 8. She's
Yeah.
traveling at 8, doing the travel thing. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's not nothing too crazy, but yeah, like around, the
Yeah,
New York, the five boroughs, Jersey,
yeah.
kind of Long Island, that thing. Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And how good is your son getting at drums? That's fun.
He can play. It's a
Yeah.
really tough balance for me, because I want him to practice more, but I know if I push too hard, he's just going to be like, get out of
I'm
here.
done.
I don't want to do it. So I'm
Yeah.
really trying to, you know, lead a horse to water, but just
Find the line.
let
Yeah.
him enjoy it and find the joy. I went too strong at first. I think he started when he was 4 or 5, and I went too strong, and I felt him really pushing away. So now I'm trying to just like chill. He plays in these 2 after school bands,
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm trying to just let him find the joy in it. But yeah, he performed at his talent show last month in front of hundreds of people, solo drums, a little 6-year-old dude. So he can play.
That's sweet. Do you have any video of him doing that?
Yeah, yeah, sure
If
do.
you could send me that, that'd be so sick. I'd make a reel of this and like show him playing. That'd be super fun.
I will. I
Okay,
will,
cool, cool, cool,
definitely.
cool.
Yeah.
Man, so many things to ask. So going back to when you were a kid, siblings. Do you have any siblings?
I have an older sister, yeah.
Okay, nice.
And she
T-
also lives in New York, which is great.
okay, is she as musically inclined as you?
She's not.
Okay,
She's not. She doesn't have, I think she could have been, but she's claimed she doesn't. But yeah, she doesn't have that artistic angle that I have. She's in education. She's doing some really great things. She's
yeah,
involved with an organization called Runway for Recovery right now, that puts on fashion shows as fundraisers for people that have been affected by breast cancer. So
oh, cool. Good
kind of
for her.
relates right to our situation with our mom. Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Who's older, you or your sister?
She's 4 years older than me.
Okay.
So yeah, whereas my mom was kind of a more wild spirit, and she would certainly come down on us hard if we were in trouble. My sister was almost more of a surrogate mother in my life in a lot of ways
Hmm.
than my actual mother was. Just
Really?
yeah,
That's super
she's always
special.
kind of watched over me, and she's sort of a protective older sister.
Yeah, so you guys are pretty close even to this day then.
Yeah, and my kids are 2 years apart, so they're almost more in the where they can play together and do some of the same stuff versus me and my sister 4 years apart. Those are 2 completely different developmental ages. Yeah, so
Hmm.
but it was good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as a kid, for you, influential music, what were you listening to? You said Jimi Hendrix, but what was inspiring you to eventually pick up the guitar and like, this is the thing I'm going to hone in on?
Yeah. Certainly when I was first getting into it, early 90, I loved, grind like Nirvana. I loved that kind of thing. I was a huge fan, like I said, of Jimi Hendrix and sort of the great guitar players of the 60s and 70s.
Hmm.
But I was all over the place at a young age. I loved listening to jazz. I loved listening to funk and groove, organ music. I think my interests have always been incredibly diverse, in terms of music. I love improvisational music. I love hearing musicians improvise and just have a freedom. Of course, songs are great too, but I think as a young guitar player, the virtuosity of hearing incredible musicians improvise is something that I loved and has continued to this day.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what you play primarily jazz, funk, groove stuff now, right?
A lot, yeah, but I will say, being a musician in New York, my musical life is really diverse. So I play world music, I'll play soul and R&B gigs with hip hop artists that are
Mm,
kind of hip hop and rock, and I love all kinds of music.
yeah.
My records that I'm putting out these days are more in the jazz, what people would call jazz, instrumental, improvised music, and that's what I do love to listen to mostly these days as well.
Okay. Where could we find your stuff on
Yeah,
Spotify?
Spotify. Yeah,
Just search your
Spotify,
name in.
Apple Music. Yeah, yeah. Search my name on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever, and then yeah, I put little snippets of ideas up on my Instagram page too, and I'll post links too. And I have a new record that's coming out in September, so I'm really excited about that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to listing that in the show notes as well. Sweet, man.
Totally.
When you were touring, tell me how you got into touring. I mean, actually, let's just, if you don't mind, you're young, you're picking up like the Hendrix stuff, you're listening to a lot of different things. You start to decide like, this is the thing I'm gonna do. Walk me through that, like high school, then like getting into Berklee. Like that's obviously pretty prestigious. I don't know a ton about schools, but I know Berklee and I know music there. So tell me about that journey and like how that kind of crescendoed into where you are today.
Yeah, I was primarily self-taught my whole life until I went to Berklee. So I've sort of, which was great in a lot of ways. So I'm a musician who primarily learned by ear. I wasn't reading music. I didn't have a lot of direct instruction, which I think in a lot of ways is the best way to learn. Because as a musician, well, it depends on what genre you're in, but for what I do, it's great to have an ear. And I was developing that in high school. But when I went to Berklee, there was a huge learning curve for me in a lot of ways. And some things I was already proficient in it from just because I did do a lot of written music and music theory and stuff in high school. I did have a good handle on all that. But Berklee was a great challenge for me. There was so many incredible musicians everywhere and so much to learn. And yeah, it's tough there's so much going on, but yeah, I think that's I just decided this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to just dive in, go for it, and go to Berklee.
Yeah. So getting in, was that a relatively easy process?
Yeah, it wasn't something I thought too much about. I didn't even think about whether I was going to stay there at that point in my life. I wasn't sure of how long I was going to stay there, but I knew it was something I wanted to try.
Yeah.
I decided I wanted to try to pursue music at that point.
Yeah. So like I'm a self-taught to play guitar and
Oh, cool.
piano and stuff. Like YouTube was my main teacher growing up. You know, you hear a song you really like and then you go and obsess over it for hours until you kind of can follow it. And then as you play it more, you can kind of, like you said, improv and figure out, oh, this sounds good here, this sounds good there. So that's one way of learning. But then you get to Berklee. What was that like when you're sitting down for the first time in class and they're starting to teach you? Was it odd because it's a totally different learning environment, or what do you think?
It wasn't odd. It was a lot. That's what I can say. It was a lot to take on. I feel like these music schools, especially, at least I can be a testament to my experience, that there's so much information coming at you. I could have taken 1 or 2 classes and just spent all day for 3 months on those 2 classes, but you're taking, I can't remember how many, 5, 6 classes. You've got so there's just such an incredible amount of information coming at you, just a fire hose of info. That's a challenge to just try to take that in and internalize it, because there's, in one of those classes in 3 months, there's probably enough to practice for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got all these other elements coming at you, and so it's hard to decipher what to boil down, and you know, you almost don't have a chance to make that decision. You're just trying to get good grades and trying to do the best you can and create these relationships with all the musicians. I was already gigging. I was already playing pretty actively in Boston at Berklee at that time too, around the scene in Boston. So I had, because I grew up in Boston, I had a whole life outside of Berklee of musicians that I knew and grew up with in the scene. So that was actually a really cool thing for me, that I had a whole life of musicians playing in New York, playing in Boston at that time, plus the whole Berklee life. But balancing all that with the schoolwork, it wasn't difficult per se in terms of getting a good grade. It wasn't rigorous in that way, but it was rigorous in the way that you just want to make the most of it. And there's just too much information coming at you at once. I still have some of my folders and some of my books that I look back at and try to practice stuff that I was looking at way back then. You know, even just, you have your private instructor. You could probably just have your private instructor and just do that for 3 months. Forget all the classes, but then you've got ensembles that are putting new pieces in front of you and then you have to show up and you want to crush it for all your ensemble work. You've got, shows, Berklee has shows lined up. You've also got music theory classes. You've got what they call ear training. There's just so many elements to work on at once that I didn't feel overwhelmed, but I could definitely tell that it's just too much information for me to gather at once.
Yeah. And so many things. How do you do ear training?
Yeah, ear training is really important. I teach I have some students, some really great musicians, not a lot, but I teach a limited amount of private students, and I teach them ear training. So first thing is just I'd say the best way to start learning ear training is trying to hear it. On piano, someone plays a chord, and the most basic is, tell me whether that chord is major or minor. I'm sure you could do that, right? Most people could do that aren't even musicians, right? Mm-hmm. Here's a major chord, here's a minor chord. And then, okay, you're going to add in uh, a little bit more complexity. I'm going to add in a sus4 chord. I'm going to add in a diminished chord. I'm going to add in an augmented chord. Then I'm going to start adding seventh chords, which means I don't want to get too technical here, but instead of 3 notes in a chord, 4 notes in a chord, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to have, I can have someone where you can't see play that on piano, and can you identify, oh, that's a C7 flat 9 chord just by listening. Oh, that's a C minor 7, C minor major 7. That's a C minor 7. And just being able to start to hear all that. That's kind of just a very basic example of ear training, being able to sing scales. Another element of ear training is being able to see a melody written on paper and sing that back. That's called dictation. So you have to do that in front of the class, sing.
Oh man, that would be embarrassing, but fun to try.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's 4 levels of that. And I was fortunate because I was born with a really good ear. I'm from a pretty musical family. My grandmother was a professional musician. She went to Juilliard. She had perfect pitch. And my mom had a really good ear. So I was put into the top levels ear training 4 when I got to Berklee, and it was talk about intimidating. It was kids that this was their 4th semester doing that. And I had never done anything like that, gotten up in front of a class and had to sing. But I could sing if someone wrote a melody. If someone wrote it, I had the ability to sing it. Yeah.
Wow. So you don't technically have perfect pitch, but you pretty much have perfect pitch. Is that what I'm hearing?
I call it, yeah, I have relative pitch. Relative pitch, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
There's now the amount of, it's such a different world out there now. So you can go on YouTube and do ear training, and there's tons of great stuff doing exactly what I said, where there's a guy that will play a chord and then give you a couple seconds and you have to say the chord or sing scales. The amount of resources on YouTube is incredible. And that didn't exist back then. But yeah, ear training is a really important part of music for sure, if you want to take your music to the next level as a student.
Yeah, super interesting. Thanks, man, for diving into that stuff. I geek out about that stuff. I never went to school for it, but obviously, like I said, I love music. So to hear somebody who went through all of these different courses and regiments of training, it's pretty neat to hear about.
Yeah, because you want to get to the point, especially if you're reacting quickly in musical situations, where you can hear what everybody's doing. If you're listening to a song, hopefully you can, I can hear a song and I can hear all the chords without playing guitar, right? I can say, okay, here's the chords exactly, even if I'm not playing. And it's helpful to have that ability as a musician to be able to hear everything that's going on. Oh, I can hear what the bass is doing. I can hear what the chords are, without having to say, oh, can someone give me a sheet of music and explain to me what's happening?
Yeah, interesting. So I have a question for you around this music stuff. So for me, I'm not trained, but I have found, and I don't think this is actually a good thing, but I found that like my desire to go and practice is usually pretty impulsive. Playing piano always kind of gives me a certain type of feeling when I go into it, and then I'll kind of go across the mood spectrum as I'm playing, and we'll figure out where we're going to end up. But it's usually pretty impulsive especially when I go to pick up my guitar. It's usually a certain kind of emotion I'm feeling, like, oh, I need to go play my guitar. Like, I need to go play my guitar. For you, you seem like a pretty disciplined person. So I'm wondering if that is the case with you at all, or if you're just like so committed to your craft, like, no, today I'm going to go practice at this time to this time. And then you get into the emotional side of it and you're enjoying it as you're playing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's much more structured for me. It's not impulsive at all. It's on one hand, one way you can say it is that, I have things that I'm working on that, and those are structured through my day. If I have a schedule, I know when I'm going to have time to practice. I'm going to make that time to work on stuff, whether it's for shows I have coming up, composing stuff, working, I have all these different projects. So it's definitely structured into my day. And then the other thing I would say is basically anytime I have free time, if I'm not doing something else, I'm probably going to have a good time and be practicing or playing and having fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Good answer. Thank you for answering. So then Berklee, you're graduating. Like you said, you're already part of the gig scene and you're playing and throughout college. Did you make the connections prior to graduation that got you into touring? And then who did you tour with, or what did you tour with, like genre wise?
Yeah. So it's not like an exact direct connect to who I ended up touring with, but it is really connected in terms of who I was playing with. And when I moved to down to Brooklyn at that time, like 2004, 2005. I'm in this neighborhood called Williamsburg, and it is a really exciting time in Brooklyn musically. There's a lot going on. A lot of musicians and artists were in this neighborhood. And so I fairly quickly, or I tried, and I think I had some success of just meeting a lot of people. I was going out all the time and playing, and that's what led me to the touring. Berklee to some degree, but certainly the Brooklyn music scene became what led me to touring. And I toured with a bunch of different cool bands for years. I toured with one band called the Pimps of Joy Time, which was a fun sort of electro funk band, groove, sort of Sly and the Family Stone, but a kind of more modern context, dance groove band, but also with great songs. And it was a great crew of people. And we hit it hard. We were a big festival band, and we toured. I was in that band for about 10 years, touring
Wow.
relatively constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you're not touring right now, correct?
Yeah, basically what happened was and when I wasn't touring with that band, I would pick up tours with other bands. I toured with tons of great artists, which was really a blessing. I had a band called Walk Talk, and we were doing a lot of touring, but especially when the pandemic hit, I had so many shows on the road scheduled for that year. I had a crazy year plan, and then, like everyone else, the brakes were hit, and it was a reevaluation time for me in so many ways, but I got to spend so much time with my kids, and I really decided that I wanted to focus on being home more and not being away so much. For instance, the night my daughter was born, I was leaving the next morning for Colorado at 6 a.m. So if she had been born like 12 hours later, I would have missed it. Luckily, I subbed out those shows, but then maybe she was 3 weeks old. I went to Europe for like a month or something like that, and that was just part of my life back then. And, missing the kids, it's painful for me. It's painful for the kid. If you have a partner, which, if you don't have a partner, it's nearly impossible. But, for my wife and my partner, it's harder on her when I'm away. So there's just so many elements, but I just didn't want to miss, my kids growing up. So
Yeah.
I kind of made a conscious decision during the pandemic that I'm going to try to focus, not that I'm not willing to tour, but I really want to focus on trying to build a life here in New York and play here and be an artist in New York rather than traveling all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that obviously affected your children's lives. It affected your life. How did it affect your marriage?
It's good. It's good. Yeah. It's funny because our schedules are still crazy. It's not like we have all this downtime together. My wife has an incredibly busy schedule. She has a huge job that takes a ton of time and is very stressful. So we're still kind of just balancing it the best we can. It's not like our life since I stopped touring is all chill and roses, but we're in it together, and the balance is difficult. It's certainly a lot to take on, but I think it's been great that I've been home. It's great. I don't think the kids could do all the stuff that they do every day, because I have a cargo bike. I have one of those cargo bikes, and I'm all in. I'm a diehard commute cyclist in New York.
Do you ride a fixie?
I have a fixie, but
Okay.
at this stage in the game, I have a commute, like a big cargo bike. And so I bike the kids everywhere, all around the city. I put like 6,000 miles in commute biking in New York a year.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow, man.
I don't ride in cars. I don't take Ubers. I don't ride the subway. I commute by bike everywhere all year round. Rain, snow, 10 degrees.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
totally diehard. Biking is the best way to get around New York. So yeah, I have this big bike that I put both the kids in, and we go all over the place. I bike them to school. My son goes to school in Manhattan. I bike him over the bridge every day, and yeah.
I'm like looking up how many miles, because I ride quite a bit. Like I ride anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a week, but I feel like I don't hit 6,000 miles a year.
Yeah. And that's just commute cycling, that's not like riding,
Yeah.
not cycling.
Yeah, because you do Zwift and stuff too. I was looking at your Strava profile. Do you do that just for extra fitness, or?
Yeah. Cross training for me at this point.
Yeah.
Biking in New York, there's tons of, in terms of cycle training, obviously there's a million incredible cyclists, but It's dodgy, man. Biking
Yeah.
in New York, dude, the cars, like going fast. If you're doing loops in the park, there's just, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
I feel like I have commute biking down though. It's not like I don't want to get overconfident. Like it's dangerous out there, but I have a really good sense of how to commute safely in New York. You know, this current cargo bike I have is like has like 12,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
logging the miles.
yeah, yeah. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
I recently just learned about this underground bike races in New York and Boston, all these big races. It's the fixie bikes, and they're like doing the checkpoint things. Do you know what that's called?
No, I
Oh
know about
man.
the running style of this, that they have these like unsanctioned night races with
Yeah.
running, that Orchard Street runners, they do these marathons and like 30-mile races starting at night, and they run through New York totally unsanctioned.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty rad, but I don't know about the bike ones. Tell me about it.
So the bike ones are it's called Monster Track.
Oh, okay.
And it's like you enter one of these races and there's people stationed around the city at checkpoints. You all start at the same place, and it's kind of based on your knowledge of how the city flows to figure out the fastest point from A to B. And these guys are riding fixie bikes where they're doing 20, 30 miles an hour. They're not stopping at lights. They're just like weaving, bobbing through all of this traffic. And then they're making these checkpoints. Guys are clipping their card and then they're going off to the next thing. And it's not sanctioned by any like official body or UCI cycling or anything like that. But it's just wild because these guys, like, just to stop, I mean, you have to like lift up your back tire. They're like pedaling backwards and like doing this weird drifty skid thing, putting
So
a foot up
insane.
in the, yeah, it's just like, I'm amazed by the city cyclists because I live out in the country of Tennessee and I'll
Oh
ride
yeah.
4 hours, 80 miles and see 5 cars. So it's like very quiet. But then in New York, it's like your level of awareness and the heightened, even
Yeah.
for doing what you do, it's like just another level. I guess it's good for cognitive performance as long as you don't get smashed. But
I'm telling you, man, when you're riding like I am commute biking in New York, it's this incredibly heightened level of awareness. It's like commando mode or battle mode or something. If a
yeah,
car in the corner of your eye does something a little weird, you're just aware of everything. You know, you're
yeah,
looking like at all these things all the time. Yeah, you have to be hyper focused, but it's also a sort of secondary. You're not thinking about it. It's just you're just
yeah.
aware of it. You know what I mean?
Your sixth sense.
Yeah, sixth sense, exactly.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
One question I did want to ask: what does your wife do? You said that she has a crazy busy schedule.
Yeah, she is the head of communications for the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Okay, wow. So there's
Yeah,
lots of what's going on, galas and people
yeah.
coming in and out. Yeah.
For instance, the big Met Gala. One of her teams puts on the Met Gala.
Wow.
She, all the all the exhibitions, all the press for all the exhibitions. She manages that. She's, in meetings with the head of the New York Times art section and the director of the museum all the time. And so she manages, there's all that, like you said, the gala, there's all the events, and then there's also the exhibitions, all the just general press that goes on at the museum. It's just a never ending amount of stuff to do and stuff that's flying at her in all directions.
Yeah. Wow. So between you and her, you're obviously super busy. You got the kids doing the music stuff. What do you have time for else to add in your life? Anything?
Mm. Uh, I know, not really.
Yeah.
And my life it's very fulfilling with just that. Like
Yeah.
I said, the family, kids, music and running. There's not time for much else.
Yeah, you pretty much maxed out. That's what I figured. I was just curious. So David, who inspires you?
Mm. Who inspires me? There's too many names to even throw out there. Everyone
Yeah.
who's out there who's doing it, who's just doing the thing inspires me. You just have to go onto Instagram and just, wow, there's so many people that inspire me daily, whether
Hmm.
they're people that are famous or people that are just in their own zone grinding away. Friends of mine, people I follow on Strava, they inspire the hell out of me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Other musicians that I look up to, that I can, see that they're doing what they have always wanted to do. I have so eternal respect for people like that. So yeah.
Yeah. So when you drill down, I'll drill down a little bit more. Any mentors, like people that have like really been a sounding board or someone you can lean on as you've navigated, which sounds like a very like good but busy and many options for life.
I can't point to one person who's a
Really?
mentor. No,
Really?
I'm kind of someone that I've had a million people help me. There's no doubt about it. I've had a million people that have helped me in so many ways, and I'm so grateful for that. But I'm someone I'm a solo mission type of dude,
Hmm.
and I carve my own path. And I run solo. I don't train in a group. I don't do the run club thing.
Yeah.
And same with my music. I have different crews that I love to play with, but I wouldn't say I directly have one mentor. I pull inspiration from so many places, but there hasn't been one person that I could easily point to as my mentor or my main, as you said, sounding board. It's not something
Yeah.
I would be mad at if I had. It would be great, but
Sure.
it just no, yeah, it hasn't gone like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about running.
Let's do it.
When did you find running? When did it become a thing for you?
It really became a thing in that era when I was first going vegan and starting to go to the gym. I think actually, to give a little bit more context, when I first moved to New York, 2004, 2005, I was I was a total party animal. No doubt about it. I went out every single night, 7 nights a week till like 4 a.m. every night for years.
How did you live?
Yeah, it was great. It's a great thing to do in New York when you first move and just experience that. And um, I was drinking. I wasn't, not like a drug user, just to be frank. So I don't smoke. I smoked a little weed at that point in my life, but not, that wasn't, I was drinking. I wasn't getting like trashed, but I was going out and partying all the time. And that was probably, my early to mid 20s. And then at a certain point, I think one of my friends was going to the gym and I'm like, damn, I need to start going to the gym,
Mhm.
And I remember one day being at the gym and seeing this dude on the treadmill, just getting after it. And he was just covered in sweat. And I was like, that looks like it feels good. I bet that dude's going to feel good when he leaves the gym. Something clicked in me that day. I remember seeing him like really getting after it on the treadmill. And I think I wasn't into running at all, but I started just doing the treadmill thing, which is like, I think a good way to get into running.
Yeah.
And certainly when I was touring for years, so I started going to the gym a lot. I would do the treadmill, but totally unfocused running. I'd just be like, oh, let's go fast on the treadmill for a while, completely unfocused. And then same thing as I started touring, I'd use the hotel gym. And if they had a treadmill, I would just rock that hotel treadmill for a while. And then I think at a certain point, I started to get more into running, in the cities I was at. I started to realize, wow, running is when you're a touring musician, running is like the best thing because all you need is your running shoes and you can just put them on and go rock, no matter how much time you have. You have 2 hours, cool, I'll go for a run. You have 40 minutes, cool, I'll go for a run. Like you can get it in no matter what. And I one little side note is that I'm also was like an avid tennis player for years and I was really into tennis. I was competing here in New York in like an awesome league and I'm super into tennis. And I started to kind of get less into tennis and more into running and the whole triathlon thing. And I did my first try. It was like an Olympic try. And this might have been like 2014 or something. And I remember, I'm a pretty slow swimmer. I'm a slow and steady swimmer. I can do long distance, but I'm
Hmm.
going to be a back of the pack swimmer guy. I'm just like, let's get through the swim, average cyclist, pretty good cyclist, but nothing special. But then I noticed on the run, I was like, I'm passing everybody, like literally passing I was like, and I think that first race, I was like, I guess maybe I'm a fast runner. It had never even really occurred to me to compare to anyone else. I'd just been kind of running on my own.
Hmm.
It's pre-Strava for me or anything. I didn't even track my pace at that point. I think I had like maybe an Apple Watch or something, but I
You
didn't
just
really
went until
care.
it hurt bad
Yeah,
enough.
yeah, I did totally unfocused training, and then um, I remember that first try I did. Yeah, I like passed a couple hundred people on the run, and at that point, I thought maybe I'm a good runner. Maybe that's something I should focus on. And as I said, I continued to do the tries and nothing too crazy. I did some half Ironmans, but every race, the same thing would happen where on the run, I would just cruise. Maybe one guy, I'd be surprised, maybe one or two people might pass me, but also because I'm starting a little back, I have that advantage because I'm a slow swimmer.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just cruising past everybody on the run. And I started to realize, okay, running is definitely my strength here and starting to hone in on it a little bit. Didn't do my first official marathon until 2019, where I completely didn't properly train, but I'd been doing, long distance tries and stuff. So I was like, I can do a marathon, right? So I signed up for my first marathon and I think I ran like 3:10, which was pretty good. Um,
Yeah, that's pretty
and
good.
my legs were like destroyed at the end of the race, but I was like, I did it. I crossed the finish line. Like
Yeah.
I can do this. And, not, not long after that, the pandemic hit. And that's when especially through my Instagram community, through Strava, I started to really dial in and learn about running, learning how to train for running. And it's something that I just totally fell in love with, trying to hone in on becoming a better runner and figure out how to train properly for races. And like many things in life, like music, it's not something that you just figure out and you get. It's something you have to constantly tinker with and
Hmm.
try to improve upon. And uh, I'm still seeing, improvement in results, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll highlight the marathon that you just did in New York back at, like, I guess it was early May. You ran 6:37 average
Yeah.
for the 2:53. Was that your fastest marathon yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had run 2:55 a couple times. Um, and, sub three, in like the high twos range. But yeah, that was a breakthrough for me for sure. And it's kind of ironic because I did Boston 3 weeks before that.
Yeah.
And
3:10.
even though my race wasn't that bad timing wise, it was a horrible race for me, to be honest.
Really?
Um, yeah, you're from Tennessee. You're probably used to like warmer temperatures. I trained all winter in New York, and it was hot for someone from the Northeast. It was hot, man. It was like 60 at the start, and just really sunny, and
I
like
love it.
70 degrees by like the end of the race, which I've been training in high 30s,
30s.
yeah, 40s all winter. Yeah, probably bulk of my training was, yes, low 30s even. And uh I just totally, it was brutal, man. It was brutal for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
because regardless of time, I want to have somewhat of an even split, right? At the end of the day, that's what's going to tell the story of a race. Like your time is going to be one thing, but how are your splits is really going to tell your fitness and what
Yeah.
happened, and yeah, to say I fell off the cliff was an understatement. Yeah. Cause I was cruising through like 15 and then it's just like, I was so dehydrated. Everything fell apart for me.
Just blew up.
And I like felt just awful after the race. I was nauseous. I was like, oh God, what am I doing to myself here? So it was total vindication that what that next race was only 3 weeks later and the
Yeah. Your
conditions.
revenge race.
Yeah, exactly. It was my revenge race. So it made it that much sweeter. And you know what? I'm just trying to learn from everything. Nutrition has been the hardest element for me
Mm.
to dial in. The actual training, like I can push, high 70, 80-mile weeks. My body does fine with that. I love running at marathon pace for long periods of time. I can do that. But nutrition for me has been a tough one to figure out running because my natural is just running fasted. I don't like to eat when I run. So I've
Oh yeah.
really been trying to learn. And that was partly in Boston. I was just dehydrated. I wasn't fueling. I was trying to fuel, but my stomach felt weird. Anyhow, um, I think I really locked that in on that last race in New York. I had a handheld water bottle with me, which I had never done before. And I used that. I used the Scratch. Um,
Okay. Like the
you know,
super fuel or
yeah, it's the liquid carb one.
yeah.
Yeah, I forget
Carb
exactly what
mix.
it's called. Yeah, so having that, you can get quite a bit of carbs in that powder in a handheld water bottle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
75 grams of carbs right there. So I had that handheld water bottle. I was sipping that the whole time. I was using the untapped. Um,
Maple syrup stuff.
yep, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and kind of like washing that down with the water. And man, It was a great race for me.
Yeah.
And I
Good for you.
never really, there's a hill at the end. So like my pace slowed a tiny bit, but I felt as strong on mile 25 as I did on mile 3.
Wow, that's a great feeling.
Yeah, it was a great feeling. And I, like I said, I had good races before, but never felt quite that strong at the end. So it was great.
Yeah. So I'm curious with your nutrition strategy. Obviously, I've heard that side of it, like what you're taking for carbs.
Mhm.
And then obviously I'm assuming you're training with that stuff. But in terms
Mhm.
of electrolyte and like sodium intake,
Yeah.
are you taking stuff as well?
Yeah, I have their little electrolyite tablet salt
Yeah.
stick. Yeah,
Yeah,
salt
yeah, yeah.
stick. Yeah, those
You take
little
the pills
you
or
chews. I have
oh, you
pills
take the
that I'll take
juice.
before the race, in
Okay,
like a day
preload.
before and the morning before, morning of, and then I have the little. It almost looks like a mitt, like that little
Yeah.
white thing that you chew. The chews that I do during the race.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool,
those are
man.
cool.
So where are you shooting for time wise? Like what do you think you're capable of now?
It's tough to say. I mean, I hope I can push down to the low 250s. I feel like that's possible. Um, it's yeah. I'm reevaluating my marathon pace a little bit right now
Yeah.
because I didn't think I had that in me, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I had been training at that. I had been doing my long runs right around that 635 to 640 pace. I had been doing my long runs there, but there's training runs, executing on race day is a totally different thing
Oh yeah.
than
Gotta
executing
show
on
up.
on a training run.
Yeah.
There's just so many exterior elements. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but yeah, I think I could push a little bit more for sure.
Yeah. I see a 245 in you.
Yeah,
I think it's possible.
that would be epic.
You nail that nutrition, get your carbs per hour up to about 100. Yeah, you'll be cruising.
Yeah, and I just keep pushing my volume. I'm a believer in volume.
Yeah.
In terms of training, I think if you push your volume in those long, big training weeks, that's going to pay dividends on race day.
Yeah.
It amazes me that, when I see some people that don't have such high volume and they're running fast, but for the most part, seems like everyone I know that crushes, at least in running, long, just, marathon times, they're doing big
Yeah.
volume.
Big miles. Yeah.
Big miles,
100%.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple more questions for you.
Cool.
The first one is a hypothetical. So it's kind of a sad hypothetical, but let's pretend you got into a bike crash and you lose your ability to use your right hand. Are you right-handed?
Yeah.
So you lose your right hand and you've like really messed up your foot and it's going to be many years and you may never even get to run again.
Okay.
So you've lost these two big pieces of who David is. Do you think that your identity is so attached to what you do that it would be very hard for you to figure out what to do next? Or do you feel relatively disassociated enough to where you could like pick something up and find a new skill to hone or a new thing to do?
That sounds tragic, but
It is tragic.
I think I would pivot. I think
Yeah.
I'd have the ability to pivot pretty quick and try to
Yeah.
figure out. I think it probably wouldn't be something completely different. It'd be like, okay, I'm going to become a composer now. If I can't play guitar, I'm going to go deep in composing. And if I can't use my foot for running, I'm going to figure out a way to be a one-legged swimmer or something. I don't know. I would find a way to pivot no matter what I need to do what I needed to continue my passion, even if I couldn't do exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good answers. Cool. So then one final question for you, advice for the listeners. So one thing you really put some emphasis on earlier when we were talking about your kids, and the future you would like them to have, you talked about the importance of like honing a skill, having something that you like dive deep in on and that you think that just adds a lot of value to life and then to obviously other people. So for people out there, a lot of them in my generation, especially the younger generations, they feel like, oh man, I just don't even know what to do. How do you think, what advice would you give to them to find a skill to hone?
First thing is believing that you have that skill. You have something in you to offer the world. I feel like everyone has that, whether it's playing a sport, computer coding, who knows what it might be, but believing in yourself that you can do it, just having that spark and that confidence and trying things out and believing in yourself that if you stay disciplined, you can do this. I think one of the biggest things that is sad about adults is that adults get this identity of, I can't.
Mm.
And kids, they don't have that yet. For the most part, kids, you say, do this. They'll be like, okay, cool. I'll try that. Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. Versus adults, they have, it's, like you were saying before about identity, it's built in. Oh, I'm not a runner, or I'm not a climber. I can't do that. Someone says, draw a picture. I'm not an artist. I can't draw, right? Versus tell a kid, draw a picture. They're like, cool. Yeah, I'll draw a picture of it, and making sure that as long as possible, kids retain that and they explore that and believe in themselves, that if they stick with something, they have the ability to do it. I constantly point out every time my kids see something, they're like, oh, that's cool. Look at that skateboarder. I'm like, you know how he did that? He spent hours and hours every day practicing that. And so now I'm like, every time we see something like that, I'm like, before I even get out of my mouth, my kids are like, practice, but like instilling that in them, that, shit takes work, man.
Yeah.
You gotta put in the work. The first step is believing that you can, or else the work seems meaningless.
Yeah.
But first step is believing, but then putting in that work, and showing examples of it.
Great advice. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on and letting me dive into your life. And honestly, we walked all over the time periods. I tried to keep it a little more chronological, but you did really great. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing so much with me.
Man, I can't thank you enough for having me. That was much more far-ranging than I expected.
Yeah.
And
yeah, for sure.
I didn't get to learn about you as much.
Well, we'll make sure that happens. I've had a few people being like, yeah, you need to be interviewed. I was like, I'm not that interesting. So
yeah, if you want to come on my pod, that'd be great.
Yeah, hit me up. That'd be awesome.
No, but it was great meeting you, man. You really, you're doing a great job here with your pod.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This is awesome. And I'm super thankful for you having me, and hopefully I gave some good insight.
Awesome. Thank you so much to David for coming on the pod and allowing me to dive into his life and share about all of the amazing experiences he has had, from a more wild child to the humble beginnings of becoming a musician to touring, it sounds like, all over the world. Such a cool experience to hear about that. And then on top of all of that, an amazing runner, obviously. I want to leave you with a couple of words, just that he left us in terms of his advice when I asked him, how do you find a skill to hone? And he said, basically, believe in yourself and stay disciplined. Obviously, sometimes that's a little easier said than done, but I think if you practice it, it is possible. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much. It means a lot that you're here to listen and that you're continuing to help grow and share this podcast. Wherever you're listening, it would mean a lot to me if you could like, comment, subscribe, leave a review, drop a comment, wherever it is, wherever you're at. Sharing and doing all those things really helps us to continue to grow. So I thank you for that. And if you also want to jump in on any future giveaways or hear about things that we've got going on behind the scenes, you can sign up for our newsletter at stupidquestions.show. That would mean a lot to me as well. So thank you guys so much for jumping in here and listening to this podcast. I will catch you in the next one.